All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Luxury Cruising. I'm your host, Krystal Sodaitis, and I'm so excited to have a dear friend of mine on today to wrap up our series on river cruising. Heidi is here today to talk to us about her experience on Tauck cruises on the MS Grace. Heidi, tell the audience whatever you want them to know about you.
Thank you so much, Krystal. It's fantastic to be here with you. As she mentioned, we are friends that go way back. I'm Heidi Rosenstock. I live in Houston, Texas, and while not a huge cruiser, we had an amazing time on the Tauck River cruise with my husband and our two high school kids.
Yeah, and that's another reason why I really wanted Heidi to come on the show because she took her two high school age kids on the river cruise. And we're definitely going to get into the luxury, but we're also going to talk about taking kids on a river cruise because most people, when they think about river cruising, they think of Viking, which is adults only, aka mostly geared towards adults. But I know because I followed her trip on social media, and I know that they had a fantastic time. So tell us, let's just think about the trip when you're planning the trip. What made you choose Tauck?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in part, I had a very dear friend. We actually went with one other family who also had one sort of high school age child. And these are folks who we have been friends with forever. So, in part, honestly, she did some of the heavy lifting. But I think there were a lot of things that drew us to Tauk. One was just the route. So, we did on the Grace, we did the Basel to Amsterdam route up the Rhine and loved it. It was a real chance for our kids and our families to see Europe from sort of a calmer perspective, right? Rather than the big cities of Europe. We also really liked the all inclusive nature of Tauk. There was no pick your trips and pay extra for this one. There was really no extra for food, for alcohol, for your trips. There was no expectation that you would actually even tip the staff. It was all included in everything you did. And that appealed to us enormously. We actually went in 2022, which means we were coming out of what was some of the most stressful 2 years, I think, for everybody on this planet. And we just didn't want to have to think about anything.
Yeah, yeah. So, tell us about the ship, the layout, the style. What did the ship look like?
Yeah, I have to think about this for a minute. It was 3 or 4 decks, I think. Like I said, it's been a little while. You had a teeny tiny little workout room. It wasn't much of anything, but there was so much to do during the day. I mean, I think it had like a bike and a treadmill and maybe a couple of weights in there. It didn't have much. The rooms were very comfortable. We had a room with a balcony, and our two kids shared another room that was just like ours. There were a couple of dining sort of areas. Most of the meals were really in one main dining area, and the expectation really was sort of that everybody ate there at sort of the regular times, but the food was unbelievably fantastic and very varied. I'm sure we can talk about that later. And then there were a couple of different lounges. There was one sort of at the top, and then there was a lounge in the back, and then there was a huge open deck. In fact, there were 2 stories to the deck. So there was a little like track you could take around the deck, but then there was tons of seating area outside, some under cover, some in the sun. You're going slow on a river cruise. There's not, waves or anything. So lots of opportunity to sit outside.
Yeah, I have to say that that's one of the things that I am most looking forward to on a river cruise is that I love being on the boat when it's moving, but
Mhm.
often for me, it's just too cold. It's too cold to be on
Right.
deck on a moving ship. And so, especially if
Exactly.
you're like laying out in a bathing suit or something. But yeah, the river ships move so much slower.
Hmm.
And the sun is some often in Europe when you go, like it's pretty hot.
Right.
And so the sun might be beating down on you so much that you'd rather be in the shade than actually laying out in the sun. So um, that is one great thing. And there's always so much beautiful um, scenic cruising.
Exactly.
And so there's always something gorgeous to see when you're like floating down those rivers in Europe.
Yeah. Very often the boat moved at night. And so you were only doing a little bit of movement sort of in the late afternoon or the early morning. But that was okay. We did have a couple days where we really were moving through more during the day. And there was one particular day where sort of our cruise guides actually did some voiceover of all the different castles and things that we were passing in their history. So that was actually quite a bit of fun.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. What was the general style of the ship? Is it more modern luxury, classic luxury?
Very much classic luxury. I mean, very
Yeah.
much sort of designed that way. But like I said, some really wonderful, sort of more modern amenities, right? Um, One of the things, personally, a favorite for me is they gave us each a very nice water bottle and actually had filtered water with gas and without gas. So bubbles and no bubbles.
Yes.
So for my picky family, that was fantastic, right? So you
Yeah.
could fill that up and use that on the boat. That felt like a more modern sort of amenity, but otherwise it had a very sort of classic feel to it, which was lovely.
Yeah, it's so nice. It is so nice rather than to have to take your little plastic cup or whatever and
Exactly.
fill it up. And I've said this before, but I know that the water from the sink is potable on cruise ships, but yet I still don't
You
like
don't.
the idea of drinking it.
I
And
know.
having a nice little, especially the option of bubbly, is really, really nice. Were there any luxurious appointments to the room? Anything that stood out to you?
It was just very comfortable. I don't think there was a lot of luxury, at least not the rooms. We weren't in sort of the lowest cost room. We weren't in the highest cost room. We were sort of right in the middle. Um, they all had great balconies, though, and big windows where you could sort of sit and just watch sort of the small towns and the river go by. But other than that, I just remember them being incredibly comfortable, but not anything
Yeah.
particularly fancy, I guess.
Yeah, just comfortable. Comfortable, like semi-modern luxury.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Did you have for the balcony, because I know some river cruises have like floor to ceiling windows, like the doors are just a giant window. So you could sit inside if it was chilly and look out, and you could also go outside and watch the castles go by.
That's exactly what it was. That's exactly what it was. And the bed was facing that way. So you could either sit, like, I think there was a tiny table and some chairs, or you could really just lay on the bed with the windows open and just
I
watch.
love that. I love that. To me, that really is a distinguishing feature of some of the more luxurious ships is when
Mm-hmm.
the bed faces the vista, whatever it is,
Exactly.
the water. So that, and if you want to, you can, understanding that with river ships, sometimes you're like docked next to another ship. So maybe you don't want to sleep
Right.
with the curtains open. But if you
Right.
wanted to, you could sleep with the curtains open so that when you wake up, that's what you see first thing in the morning as soon as your eyes open.
That's
Tell
exactly
me,
right.
the kids, do they have adjoining rooms or were they just like in a close by or side by side room?
They were not adjoining rooms that we had. It was just a side by side. This was not meant to be the kid, like Tauck does do family tours, but this was not necessarily a family tour. I mean, families
Yeah.
were allowed, but it wasn't focused on families.
Yeah. And that's, for some people, you have to know your kids and you have to trust your kids.
Right.
You have to know that they'll be okay in a room not attached to you, which is probably for your kids because they were in high school when they went
Right.
perfectly fine. And I know your kids and they're used to being on their own.
Right. Exactly. It was not an issue for us.
Yeah. So, you mentioned the dining rooms. Was there a main dining room and specialty dining room? Talk about the food layout, the different dining options.
It was really mostly just the main dining room. And then there was sort of a little bar that had snacks and sort of small, plates kind of in between. But it really was the main dining room, kind of three solids a day, right? Breakfast was a huge buffet, whatever you wanted. And then you could order a few, special things as well. And dinner, same thing. Dinner was an event. Because we were going from Basel to Amsterdam, right? So it was very themed on where we were and what country we were in. And, the wine was very carefully from sort of each region as we passed through. It
Could
was
you tell
wonderful.
if the food was like local, if it was locally sourced?
It did seem like it was actually. They talked about definitely the wines were locally sourced. We talked a lot about that with our bursar and the guys on the boat, but the food also was locally sourced along the way. The meals, the breakfast was a buffet, but the dinner was sort of a menu. But there were certain options that were on every single night. There were other options that were changed based on sort of the local specialties. And, again, it was, I had a 16-year-old boy with me. So if he wanted to order 2 entrees and 3
Yeah.
desserts, he
Have
ordered
at it.
2
Perfectly
entrees and
fine.
3 desserts, right? It was
Yeah.
fine. And that was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. Any standouts in terms of the food? Anything in particular that you were like, if I ever go back on another Tauck River cruise, I have to have this?
Not that I recall. We just loved everything. And there was always sort of a meat option, a fish option, a vegetarian option. There was a dessert that was sort of a lava cake, which again, my 16-year-old loved. And there was the night where he had a bet with our waiter on how many he could polish off, and he got through 4.
Wow. Wow.
And the staff was quite impressed.
Yeah. I would be like an overdose, like chocolate overdose
I would do. I don't even think I'd make it through half of one, but
from that. But yeah, I
he did
mean,
it.
16-year-old boys, that's what they do. Just chow it down. Awesome. Well, and I know that there was also a lot of activity to burn those chocolate lava cakes off,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
So,
Absolutely.
tell us about what you did in the different port stops.
Absolutely. So, because most of these stops are sort of smaller towns throughout, all these kind of different countries that you went through, they did a really nice job curating those. So, because we started in Basel, our first stop was Lucerne. So we were able to go up the mount there. I'm not even pronounce it wrong. I think Palladius or whatever it is, but you take sort of a gondola up, go and walk around on the top of the mountain. Absolutely gorgeous, and then come back down, spend some time in the city of Lucerne. We went to Baden-Baden and did the hot springs. We went to Heidelberg, which was just a fabulous place to sort of walk around. They had a day where they had bicycles rented for all of us. And so we actually rode bicycles through the towns and next to the river, and then sort of caught the boat at the other end,
Nice. Yeah.
which was wonderful. There was one night where they actually took us a little bit off the river to, it was almost like a half working farm, half sort of visual farm. And so we did a hike through the woods, and they taught us about all the locally sourced food. And then we were all sort of ate dinner there that night instead of on the boat. That was really
Yeah.
special.
And was that an excursion just for your ship? Was it a small
Yes.
group from the ship?
It was just our ship. I mean, you didn't have to go, but it was just the ship. And so our ship could hold up to, I think, 125 people or so. But again, because
Hmm.
this was right after the pandemic, we were only 95 people on the ship. And so it
Wow,
was a
that's nice.
very intimate group. And so, yeah, so we went to that as well as other things. We're always just our ship, all of the sort of tour pieces. It's just another sort of to the luxury and the care that they take, right? So when we got to Baden-Baden, if you wanted to go to the hot springs, they like had one of the guys kind of walk us up there. But there were 1 or 2 folks who really couldn't walk that far, so they got them a taxi, put them in, had them up there. We met them there. I mean, it was just everything was really personalized each
Yeah.
of the
Yeah. And
trips.
you felt really taken care of, which is key.
Absolutely.
Were there anything else? I love, like, for me, a huge part of luxury is service. Was there any other part of the service that really stood out to you?
Yes, this was one of my favorite stories. So I'm so excited that you asked me about it.
Tell me, tell me.
So the
Oh
other
God.
family that we traveled with, we've been dear friends for a long time, and we geek out over Rummikub. We love to play, right? So the boat had tons of games, but they didn't actually have Rummikub on the boat. So we were using decks of cards trying to imitate Rummikub, and some of the staff came by and asked us what we were doing, and we told them, and there was no Rummikub. The next night we got on the boat, and they had gotten Rummikub for us. They had sourced
Wow.
the
And who
games
knew you
and
could
brought it
even
on the
find
boat.
Rummikub in Europe?
I know, but we were like, how did you find this? And they were just laughing. They're like, we have our sources. So somehow they managed, whether they got it off another tugboat, whether they purchased it, we really have no idea. But for the rest of the cruise, we played Rummikub every night. And it made us incredibly happy, and it was incredibly special. And to your point, it made us feel heard and taken care of and like we mattered on the boat. I mean, it was really just a tiny little gesture that meant so much to us.
Yeah, yeah. Those are the small things that really, really matter and that keep you coming back, right?
Right.
Because
Exactly.
if there's something, that you need, it'll be there.
Absolutely.
Amazing. That's amazing. Anything else from the trip that you think was just like, wow, this was really more luxurious than I expected?
I don't think so. I mean, I think it was just the details were just, so well taken care of. It was amazing. I'll say the last thing that I think made the trip just very, very special for our family was we were traveling with another family, and this was not meant to be a sort of family cruise. So we had originally gone on thinking that it was going to be us, the other couple, and just a lot of seniors, right? Basically.
Hmm.
But by pure luck, there were actually a brother and sister with all of their kids who were the same age as our kids on this ship. And so out of the 95 people, I think 13 of them were high school students, basically. So
Wow.
it was just pure luck, but I think it really even further made the trip a lot of fun for everybody. So after dinner each night, there was sort of a lounge that was up on the top in the back of the boat, and they pretty much declared to all of us that that was theirs after dinner, and nobody over the age of 21 was allowed. And they were taking that over, and we all happily let them take that over, and they
Yeah.
had fun, and we had a great time with all of the other people on the boat. It's amazing.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Anything else? So that is really good luck, right? But it's also
Right.
the time of year. I mean, I think you went at the beginning of the summer,
We did.
right? When school is out, when a lot of people take their European vacations because it's not overly hot.
Yes.
And high school kids, they often have other things that they need to do during the summer. So there's kind of a sweet spot after the end of school, but right before summer stuff takes off, that a
That's
lot
true.
of people go on vacation.
Yeah, no, that makes good sense. That makes good sense. Again, we're not a huge cruise family, but we loved this Tauck River cruise. And while we haven't done another one yet, it is very much on our minds to do another Tauck cruise somewhere in the world again. We would have no hesitation about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we hope you come back on and tell us about that one. Of course, now your kids aren't in high school anymore. So now that
Right,
next is going to be cruising with your young adult children. But we'll be
right.
happy to cover that too.
Fantastic.
Any tips for families who are thinking about doing a river cruise with their kids?
Yeah, I would think setting sort of their expectations, right? We really let them, as we were picking the cruises, we really had them focus on the activities, right, in each place, and really making sure there were enough activities that were active. I'm sure there's a better word I could use, but basically, right,
Yeah.
we had options for hiking and bicycling and sort of going up the mountains. And I think that was really important that those types of activities were available in each of the places so that it wasn't getting on a bus and sitting on a bus while somebody talked to you as you looked out the window, right? I think that wouldn't have been as satisfying
Yeah,
for the
absolutely. I mean, know your kids, because
right,
like I know, for my kids, especially my older one, when we've done Europe, there is generally like some kind of cultural visit and
right,
then shopping. Every cultural visit has
right.
to be paired with shopping, and everybody's happy.
Yep.
So your kids, there could be some culture involved, but there also had to be something active, hiking, biking. Were there kayaks? Did they have kayaks or anything, any
Nope.
watercraft that you could use?
No, there were no watercraft, nothing like that. The river's so busy, I can't imagine that you would
Yeah, that's
easily.
true too. Some of those bigger rivers, you're not going to be on there on a teeny tiny little kayak or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, awesome. Well, stepping back from this cruise, we ask everybody, what is your definition of luxury?
Oh, that is a great question. My definition of luxury is that things are comfortable, that the small details that you didn't think you needed or wanted are there when you need them and want them, right? It's that anticipation, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then it's the individualization, right? It's the knowing who you are. Like, I don't need over the top. It's sort of those small things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And were you specifically looking for luxury, or were you looking for just a nice trip to take with your family and family friends?
So I think as a foursome, the adults were looking for luxury. I will say that probably for the other three adults, that was maybe more important than it was for me, but it had to feel easy and nice and personal, right? We were not going to do
Yeah.
a huge cruise. That wasn't
Yeah.
going to feel right for
Yeah.
this group.
Yeah. And 95 people sounds exactly perfect. Yeah. Did
Exactly.
it in general meet your expectations for luxury?
It definitely met my expectations and really exceeded our expectations, I think, for everything that we thought we would find.
Yeah. Yeah. If you were to choose today, your next either Talk River cruise or any river cruise, where would you want to go?
We have thought about this, but we never decided. Um, we actually looked at one where you sort of, it wasn't quite a river cruise, but it was a tout cruise. You sort of went down the coast of Spain and then a little bit into the rivers there. I think that was top of our list for sort of the
Yeah.
next possibility.
Yeah.
Although I
That
also have
sounds
heard that the Nile is amazing. So that is in the back of my mind
yes.
somewhere.
Yeah. Does Talk have Nile ships on the Nile?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I have heard great things about the Nile. And then also if there is a ship that can be a combination sort of like coastal ship and a smaller interior river, that really sounds fun. Or combining, I don't know where the Douro River starts in Portugal, but maybe
I
something
don't either.
along those lines.
Exactly. I think that is one of the Tauck tours is sort of that. So that was sort of our Portugal, Spain, somewhere there, but we didn't settle on anything.
Yeah. Well, I hope if you choose one, you'll come back and tell us all about it. Um, and the last question we always ask everyone, or I always ask everyone, is do you have any luxury trips, cruise or otherwise, planned for the future?
We do actually. In just a couple days, we are headed to Japan. Our son, who is now just finished his freshman year in college, is studying over there this summer. So our daughter and the two of us are going to head there. We're just doing Kyoto and Tokyo. Super excited.
That's going to be a great trip.
It's going to
That
be
sounds like a
amazing.
great trip.
But
Well,
no cruising with
thank-
that one. That's all going to be just land and bullet trains.
yeah. And the bullet train is apparently its own experience. So
It's
I know
actually
it's
one
going
of
to
the
be
things
fun.
I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, yeah, I know that's going to be amazing fun. Well, thank you again so much for coming and sharing your experience on Talk. And to all the listeners, thank you for being here. And until next time, I wish you safe and luxurious cruising.